Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. Today we are going to start the chapter number 3 of Strategic Management Concept and Cases 13 edition, Fred David. The chapter is about the external assessment. My dear students, actually the chapter we are going to study, it's a chapter, fourth chapter in count, but in the book it is a third chapter. As first we have studied the introductory chapter, then we have studied the chapter of VN and mission, and third chapter was about business ethics, and now we're going to study the external assessment. My dear students, as I have discussed with you earlier, that is, first we need to develop the VN and mission statement, which was a chapter 2, and then we have to perform the external audit and then perform the internal audit. Then we would be able to establish the long-term objective. So now we are at the chapter 3, and now we have to study that how to perform the external audit. Okay, my dear students, now it is time to discuss the external assessment. First of all, we need to understand that external mean the external environment. External environment of the organization mean the surroundings in which an organization is going to operate. And what are those surroundings? Obviously, we are talking about the political environment, economic environment, social environment, technological environment, ecological, legal, environmental, demographics, and we're also going to talk about the portal five forces, the competitive five forces. So we need to assess all of those environment, and we need to respond the changes of the environment accordingly. So look here, Mr. Charles Darwin, what he said that it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Obviously, the organizations who survive for the longer periods, for 40 years, 100 years, these organizations are who adopt the changes of the environment and respond accordingly. Mr. Wayne Calloway, the former CEO of PepsiCo, he said that nothing focuses the mind better than the constant sight of a competitor who wants to wipe you off the map. So it means you need to always try to focus onto your competitor, and you need to look at the strategies, you need to look at the movements, and you need to uh, identify the strategies which are going to make your sustainable performance into the environment. So my dear students, for the external assessment, what we need to do, we need to perform a management audit, and this management audit is going to be called the external strategic management audit. In the same way, we are going to have another audit which is internal strategic management audit. So now we are going to discuss the external strategic management audit, and this audit has two parts. It's going to cover the two parts. The first part is the environmental scanning. Environmental scanning is going to have another name which is macro external analysis. This macro external analysis is going to cover the pest turd, which I have discussed with you earlier in some previous class. This is going to cover P stand for political, E stand for economical, S stand for social, T stand for technological, then again E stand for ecological, L stand for legal, then E stand for environmental, and finally the D stand for demographics. So I'm going to discuss all of these components later in this chapter. Let's see what the second analysis is. The second analysis is the industry analysis, um, having another name of micro external analysis. My dear students, the micro external analysis is another name of Porter 5 forces. Can you recall these forces? Yes, bargaining power of customer, bargaining power of supplier, threat of new entrants, substitute, and competitor. So these are the factors which are going to be analyzed into the industry analysis, as it is going to be called the industry analysis. So in this, we are going to see the competition within the industry. And in an environmental scanning, we look at the general factors which can affect all the industries equally. Now, for example, when we talk about the economic, we are going to look at the inflation rate, interest rate, foreign exchange value, and many other factors. In the same way, when we talk about the political factor, so we're going to see what are the political stability and the power groups in your region, and many more perspective of such kind of who are going to affect all the industries equally. Okay, to perform the external assessment, we need to go for the strategic external strategic management audit, and it is going to cover the following factors that we need to identify and evaluate factors. These factors, which are actually beyond the control of a single firm, like increased foreign competition. No firm can control the foreign competition, as the foreign competition is established or controlled by the government, and that is a political factor of of a country. So this is not in control of a single firm. If your country is going to make such policy that your foreign competition is going to increase, you need to be identify that competition, and you need to get ready. You need to bring some of the changes to be more competitive into such environment. Then number two, we need to talk about the population shifts. We can see that many of the people in Pakistan trying to move towards urban cities, like we talk about in Punjab. So there are some of the famous cities like Faisalabad, Multan, Lahore, and such kind of cities. So many people who are living in some cities who are not much developed, they're trying to move into these cities. And if a firm is going to establish some setup, some facility into the area, and they have invested some money and they're planning something for the people into some region, but a population shift is going to be occurred, so that can affect the company's business. So they need to look at what are the population shift trends, and accordingly they need to establish their businesses. After that, the aging society, you need to identify what are the age groups or demographics are prevailing in your society, and you need to plan accordingly. Like if you are looking that there would be more old age people in your country, you need to make products for the for the old age people. So that is another thing. And then fear of traveling. You need to look at that many people who are going to have fear of traveling, what you can offer to them. And finally, the stock market volatility. If there are some changings are going to occur into the stock market, how you can respond to those volatilities or changes of the stock market. So in all of these factors, a single firm can't control these factors, but what they can do, they can respond to these changes. They can respond effectively and proactively. So when you are more proactive, that can brought some good impacts onto the financial or economic value of your company. Now we need to look at what is the purpose of an external audit. Develop a finite list of opportunities that could benefit a firm and the threats that should be avoided. So basically, the external audit is a part of the SWOT. And what is SWOT? Strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. So what we are going to do here at the moment, we are going to focus on opportunity and threats. First, we need to identify the opportunities and then the threats. And after that, in the next chapter, we will study to how to identify the strength and weakness. And then we'll see that how you can uh, try to find out the ways that you can uh, avail some of the opportunity by utilizing your strengths and overcoming your weaknesses and by avoiding the threats which are prevail in the environment. So this is the purpose uh, overall. But when we talk about the purpose of external audit, it is only to identify all the opportunities and threats. You need to list down those opportunities and threats through which you can get benefit and the threats which should be avoided. My dear student, here is the relationship between external forces and an organization. You can see here in the blue the economic forces, social, culture, demographics, and environment, nature forces, political, legal, and government forces, technological forces, and the competitive forces. Okay, and here is the list of some of the factors like competitors, suppliers, distributors, creditors, customers, employees, communities, managers, stockholder, labor union, government, trade association, special interest groups, products, services, markets, and natural environment, etc., 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 etc. Because this is not the complete list. So here all the external forces are going to be written, and here we have identified different uh, perspectives of those forces. And finally, what we derive from these perspectives, we identify some of the opportunities and threats for an organization. So that's the relationship between the key external forces and an organization. You can see if I try to uh, forces like the competitors, it belongs to the competitive forces. Supplier, it is again from the competitive forces. Distributor, again from the competitive forces. Now there comes the creditor. Yes, creditor is kind of a economic force because you take the credit by looking at the interest rates and many more things. The customer is again the competitive force. So in that way, you can draw the lines on all of these things. So it was just a demo that we can identify belong. What we need to do for the external audit, actually we need to gather the competitive intelligence, and that is the assimilate information, that you gather the information and you understand the information, and finally you evaluate it. So for the competitive intelligence, you need to find out the different pattern of that competition and how to respond in any kind of situation. So pattern for decision making, pattern for the analysis. So these are the important factors which you need to evaluate. So resulting in a list of the most important key external factors. So you need to find out that what important key external factors are there. So you evaluate those factors because all the factors are there in the market, but we need to identify those factors which are going to affect your organization, because the factors which are not going to have any kind of positive or negative impact on your organization, at the moment we are not going to study those factors. Okay, so we have to make a list of those factors who are going to have some impact onto the organization, and then we need to identify that how they can affect and how we can reduce their impact onto the organization. My dear students, look here that here we have made a uh, performing external audit chart, or we have identified some of the factors. So in external factors, we have found out four things. The first is a long-term orientation. Uh, you know, in the start of this semester, I've spent a lot of time to discuss the long-term orientation. And I told you that long-term orientation is majorly concerned with your VNN mission. So you need to identify that all the long-term perspectives, all the long-term strategies, all the long-term uh, plannings uh, is going to be uh, aligned, is going to have the relationship with your VN and the mission. They should not be unrelated to your VNN mission. Then the second important thing is that you need to uh, look at that your external factors should be measurable, that you can measure them quantitatively, that how much impact they are going to have, uh, what impact they are going to create. Uh, the third external factor is applicable to competing firms. That whatever you are going to find out the opportunities and threats, and the way you're going to respond them, those strategies, those techniques, those tactics, they should be applicable to the competing firms, and you can have some advantage uh, among those firms. And the number four is the hierarchical, that external factors have some hierarchy of the impact and they have some relationship to the organization. My dear student, this is something which I have discussed with you in the starting of this semester. IO view, industrial organizational view. Uh, what it is industry factors are more important than internal factors. Performance determined by industry forces. I have discussed this view in detail with you, so let's have some discussion on it. So I'm going to ask you that what you have understand till yet about the industrial organization view. Okay, as we have just discussed the industrial organization perspective from industrial organization view, so now we need to look at the perspective of firm performance in IO. So there's some industrial properties which are going to have some impact onto the firm. The first one is the economies of scale. Number two is the barrier to market entry. The number three is the product differentiation. The number four is the economy, and number five is the level of competitiveness. So let's again uh, have a discussion onto these topics one by one. Okay, now we need to look at the economic forces. Economic forces are going to include the first of all the GDP. My dear student, you know the GDP. GDP stands for gross domestic product, and it is going to include many of the factors, like it includes private consumption, it includes the gross investment, it includes the government investment, it includes the government spendings, and the balance of payments in terms of how much exports we are going to have and how much imports we are going to identify. The difference of them, you can say the exports minus imports. As Pakistan is a country who is not much developed, and we have negative balance of payment, mean we are going to have more imports and less exports. So that's why the more duties are going to be applied. That's why the price of the dollar is going to be increased, the money is going to be devalued, so people are going to be discouraged to purchase the imported goods. Then the trends in the dollar value mean the foreign exchange value, as I have discussed with you, that we are going to create the foreign exchange value in terms of that how much balance of payment we are going to have if we have the negative balance of payment. What we need to do, we try to devalue the money. So public is going to be discouraged to purchase the imported goods. Then unemployment rate of a society. These factors are going to give you the economic forces, and onto these areas you can identify that what is going to happen to the market and what strategies you need to make accordingly. Some of the key economic variables are mentioned here, which need to be monitored onto the regular basis by some companies. Shift to a service economy in the Pakistan, not United States, as here we are not going to talk about the United States, despite we will include the Pakistan. So I'm going to write down the Pak. So you will include Pakistan over here. Okay. Then availability of credit for the company, level of disposable income, uh, propensity of people to spend, interest rates, inflation rates, money markets, federal government budget deficit, gross domestic product trend, consumption pattern, unemployment trend, worker productivity level, value of the dollar in world markets, stock market trends, foreign countries, economic conditions, import export factors, demand for different category of goods and services, income difference by region and consumer product, price fluctuation, export of labor and capital from the Pakistan. Again, United States, and you need to look at the Pakistan. Monetary policies, fiscal policies, tax rates, then European Economic Community policies, because we need to export the products to the European community. Organization of petroleum exporting countries policies, cohesion of lesser developed countries, many many more things we need to look at. So these are the some of the key economic organization. Now it is talk about the social, cultural, demographic, and natural environment forces. So what are the major impacts? The impacts can be identified in the shape of the product. You need to offer new product, you need to modify your product, you need to introduce the new areas, the new demands you need to identify, you need to create some demands into the market for some products. So this is about the product that there's a might a change in the need of the people. Like there are some you can say disruptive technologies, disruptive products, which are going to uh, remove the market of an existing product and create a new demand. So if there is some disruptive technology and that is going to disrupt your products, so you need to move on. You need to do the innovation. You need to move on to the new technology. In the same way, it's going to have an impact on services in the same manner that nowadays we are moving towards the online banking, online ear ticketing, online financial services, and many of the online, even online teaching. So these are the impacts of social, culture, demographic, and natural environment. Like you can see that the online teaching is the impact of natural environment force. There is a corona in the natural environment. That's why no one can go out of the house. So you need to study online. After that, that there the impact of markets. Uh, mean you need to explore the new markets. You need to uh, invade some of the markets. You need to penetrate into the markets. So all of these things are going to have some impacts. Like you are going to see some changes into the demographic and graphics, and accordingly you're going to respond into the demographical areas. After that, there's the point of the customers that we need to look at. If there is some uh, aging factor, there is some population shift, so you need to identify what you need to do accordingly. So you need to look at the changing needs of the customer as well, the changing population as well, and many other factors. You can see some of the facts. World population is 7 billion. World population by 2028 would be 8 billion. World population by 2054 would be 9 billion. Pakistan population is now at the moment is more than 220 million. So, my dear students, it is some of the uh, previous forecast, but I didn't know what would be the impact now or due to the kind of pandemic of corona. But the corona epidemic is going to have impact onto the world population. So we would be able to say something almost after a year. At the moment, we cannot say anything. So let's hope for the best. Some trend, more American household with people living alone. That is another very uh, drastical impact into the American lifestyle. But these books are written by the American authors, and they are going to discuss more of the problems and the culture and the things from America. But in Pakistan, it's not going to happen. So we need to look at the difference we're going to have in our country. Mean in Pakistan, we need to look at the social impacts where more people are living in one house. You can say the density, living density or population density is too high. So in America, the population density is too low. So that is an opposite impact. And about the aging Americans affect all organizations, but in Pakistan we are not going to have the aging impact in such a way as American people are going to have. Even though Pakistan has more younger people, Pakistan didn't have the uh, high number of uh, aged people. So we are a kind of having a balanced population and more the younger people population. So that is another a difference in Pakistan. So we need to make the strategy accordingly by identifying the population factors in Pakistan. Then political government and legal forces. There are some government regulation which need to be uh, we need to respond them in a better way, like antitrust legislation. Tax rates are going to be changed, some lobbying activities are going to be performed, or some patent laws are going to be implemented by the government, so in such way they can become the opportunity and threat, and these are not in control of any organization, so they have to act accordingly as the governments are going to make different regulations, and they need to be flexible about them. You can see there are some protectionist policies. Uh, these policies are about that how a country can uh, reduce the import of some product, or they are going to impose some of the restriction onto the import of the goods, uh, they can focus on their own internal production capacities. So that is the protectionist policies, and these policies are going to be adopted by different countries, so they can have the restriction onto the import of other countries' products. So that can have some positive impact if your country is going to have the protectionist policy. But if some of the country is going to remove the protectionist policy, then it would become a threat for the company. So you need to analyze these policies. Government taking equity stakes in companies, like they are going to have kind of a nationalization. They say that we have 20% of equity in every company who's going to be registered. So these kind of things that, like back in 1970s, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto as a prime minister has nationalized all of the private organizations. So that is the same kind of impact, and obviously the private businessmen have lost their trust into doing the business in Pakistan. Uh, when we talk about the technological factor, obviously the first main important thing is the internet. However, I'm the person who belongs to the field of technology, specifically information technology, but I'm very much against to the internet, and I'm not going to have some positive views about it. So we can have these views at any time, or I can share them even in the end of the class with you. When talking about further the technology processes, we need to look at the significance of IT. For the significance of IT, we need to appoint some of the people into the organization, especially the post of CIO and CTO. CIO is the Chief Information Officer, who is responsible for the enterprise system into the organization, and then the Chief Technology Officer, who's responsible for all the kind of hardware and communication technology which is going to be provided to the CIO for the implementation of the enterprise system. About when we talk about the technological forces, this is essential for nearly every strategic decision. If we are not going to involve the technological factors into the organization, obviously we would not succeed it, because the technology is the threat for survival. It is not the opportunity. It is always the threat for survival. You want to survive. You want to be in the market. You need to be up to date in terms of the technology.